would like to recognize and would like to begin by recognizing the traditional territories we're hosted on today. We acknowledge we're hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. This meeting place is the home of many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We recognize the historical and existing power dynamics between settlers and Indigenous peoples, as well as the obligations of settlers to redress it. Recognizing that all people were brought to Turtle Island willingly, we acknowledge the dehumanizing legacy of slavery and indentured labor. We can continue to disrupt this legacy by working collaboratively towards justice and liberation. In thinking about the growing count of uncovering of children who were murdered at residential schools, we must keep in mind that this is an act of colonialism and that colonialism persists. We recognize that Indigenous sovereignty and the right to self-determination demands that we continue to fight alongside Indigenous communities towards a necessary probe into truth and reconciliation, and that we take this up in our practice. There cannot be reconciliation without truth. Good morning again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Thompson, and this is
Helen Vlahoyanakos.
And we are two of 4 equity, anti-racism, anti-oppression coaches with the Toronto District School Board. Helen and I are pleased to be sharing space with you today for Addressing the Fog, Exploring White Supremacy in Education Systems. The title of this session comes from Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, who wrote the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? In this text, she described racism, a manifestation of white supremacy, as a fog. Sometimes it is so thick, it is visible. Other times, it is less apparent, but day in, day out, we're breathing it in. Now, no good learning session is complete without learning goals. Centering your lived experiences as part of your children's school community today, we will identify and examine what or who demonstrates power, the role of white supremacy, and how it operates in education system. We will also explore possibilities to identify, challenge, and change white supremacy within education systems. Positioning the way white supremacy operates as a fog, this interactive, reflective session examines and identifies the role of power and white supremacy while exploring ways to identify, challenge, and change white supremacy in our systems.
In order to address the learning goals that we have for this session, this agenda will allow us to think and reflect together about power and white supremacy and how we can bring about positive change in our schools and communities. We will begin by looking at how power affects schools and communities and engage in an analysis to help us identify and understand it. From there, we will work together to understand white supremacy and the subtle and not so subtle ways in which it operates. We will then discuss how, together, we can interrupt and disrupt power and white supremacy and share different ways that the TDSB is working towards just that. Before we share a few resources, we'd like to spend some time looking at how we can celebrate the brilliance of young people in every school to promote and encourage recognizing the joy and excellence in all. And as we go through the different items, we invite you to share your thoughts and reflect on your experiences. We have 4 agreements that we would like to position in the space as we work We only have an hour together, and this hour really is about thinking and reflecting. This isn't about blame. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about coming together to create spaces that honor, reflect, and respect everybody in the community and in the larger world as well. So in order to do so, we have these 4 agreements by Glenn Singleton, and he has positioned these in terms of talking about having courageous conversations to discuss racism. He shares 4 agreements and 6 conditions to engage in courageous conversations about race. So the first one is staying engaged. So we ask that you look at these 4, and as I'm just explaining each of them, just think about it and where you sit with them as well. We understand that the more personal topics get, the more difficult it might be for us to stay committed and engaged. So we ask you to please try your best to stay with us. Acknowledge what is happening and bring, when you can, bring your focus back to the conversation. For the second one, speak your truth openly and authentically. This is a courageous conversation, requires that participants be honest about their thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Use I statements when sharing your experiences, and please do not share the experiences of another person to highlight a point you want to make. Also with this, it's acknowledging that our truths cannot infringe upon the human rights of others. Experience discomfort. It is important as we engage that we must not retreat from the conversation when our opinions do not align with those of others or those we've previously held. That is part of the experience. Through acknowledging our discomfort, we are able to set conditions for transformation. And finally, the last agreement that Singleton offers is expect and accept a lack of closure. As much as we appreciate definitive answers, conversations about race usually provide no resolution and will be ongoing. So Singleton also offers and refers to conditions like centering our social positionality, acknowledging our intersections of race or gender, class, ability, creed, centering those within the conversations. Each of us enters from our own identity and might have discomfort for different reasons. From your lived experiences being you, we ask you to just think, what does it mean to follow these 4 agreements? All right, and also throughout the session, we will continue to uphold a critical stance, decentering privilege. Thank you so much, Margaret, for the message in the chat. So this is being recorded and you will be able to access the recordings when they're uploaded to the YouTube channel. Okay, so thank you, Margaret, for that. All right. As we begin our learning together today, we're going to start with inviting you to think about power and how it presents itself in different ways in schools and systems. We've identified 4 examples to help us reflect on how power is manifested through daily decisions and choices. I'm going to share each one at a time, and as each is shared, we would like to invite you to think about your initial reaction. Reflect on how you would want to respond versus how you would actually respond. So here we go. The first example is a school's family literacy night is held during Ramadan at a time in the evening when families break their fast. The next one. Families are told interpreters are available for curriculum night through a newsletter shared in English. In order to access an interpreter, families must schedule meetings in advance. The third example. A young Black male student is told to read a book about basketball. And finally, the last example we have, the school's community partnerships only include the police, firefighters, and similar services through the local community center. Okay. What we are going to invite you to do, please, as you're sitting and reflecting and thinking about these 4 examples, and of course, this is 4 of many, many different examples that we could present and share. We want you to think where the power is, what your initial reaction is, and we're going to invite you to go to this Padlet. So we've just pasted the link into the chat. And I'm just going to bring it up. Here we go. All right, so here is the Padlet. When you arrive at the Padlet, when you click on the link, you will notice that the 4 different scenarios, different examples are listed here. We would like to invite you to add your thoughts right here in the Padlet. And what you can do is you just click on the plus sign and a window will appear where you can type out what your thoughts, feelings, reactions, what you would want to do, anything connected to the examples. Okay, so we're going to give you 5 minutes on here, please. You do not have to do all 4 if you do not want. You can maybe do 1 or 2, whatever feels comfortable for you. Okay. So just share it just in case anyone has just come in. Here is the Padlet. And please go ahead. It's not allowing you to edit. When you click on the plus sign, a window doesn't. Okay, let me check the permissions. Thank you for letting us know. Oh, thank you. I'm not sure. Okay, I will.
Or many,
Yes.
if it's not working, maybe what we could do is just look at them one at a time. And if people are comfortable, they could share where's the power and impact versus intent at this time.
Great idea, Tavanil. Thank you, honey. It worked yesterday, so there you don't have to always sign in. Thank you for letting us know. Thank you for letting me know. It was okay yesterday, so I'm not sure. I use this all the time in my classroom as well. But anyways, I think that's a great idea. Why don't we stay right here on the chat and we'll go through one at a time. I'll take us back to. Oh.
So we could just break them in one at a time. So a school
Sure.
family literacy night is held during Ramadan.
There we go.
Yeah.
If anyone would like to mic on or share in the chat, we could even have ideas in the chat here. Thank you. Exclusion.
Thanks,
The
Omar.
school
The
having
school has
power.
the power.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to bring in the second one. And if you still have thoughts about the first one, please do not hesitate to share. Exclude, absolutely, thank
Yes.
you. So now families are told interpreters are only available in for curriculum through a newsletter shared in English, and access, families need to schedule meetings in advance for an interpreter. Right, thank you. Thank you, Omar. No provision, yes. Yes, right? Who's creating that newsletter, right? Who is creating and for whom, by whom? Yes. Thank you, Samani. Thank you, Valerie and Heather. Yes, Heather, you know, we can assume in that first scenario that this is a community that has families that that are
With the
Muslim,
interest.
right? Yep. And Tevaniel talked about impact, intent versus impact. And we have to understand that the intent may have not been to exclude, but if that exclusion, if the impact is that families have been excluded, then we need to honor that. Even if the intent wasn't to exclude, that has happened, right? And so we need to make sure that we understand that for families. So Valerie, English speakers are making cursory efforts for non-English speakers, but without understanding how to actually reach them. Absolutely. Thank you. Jennifer, accessibility and equity weren't thought through. The offer for translation is hollow. AS, thank you. It doesn't reach the people it needs to. Yeah. Leonie, no form of community involvement. Right. Big part. I'm going to share the third one as well. Thank you, Joanne. Either ignorance about what groups might need interpretation or lack of understanding that the offer must also be made in the languages that services are being offered in. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have the third scenario here too. A young Black male student is told to read a book about basketball. What are your thoughts?
Exactly, Omar.
Thank you. Can
He's
only do
being
so
told. So
right.
the assumption which is made, they're Black, they should be in sports.
But only exactly. Thank you, Marcia. Right, only basketball. What is that assumption? What is that stereotype based on stereotypes? Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, added ignorance
Yes.
to the stereotype, totally correct there.
Yeah. It's offensive, yeah.
And parents speak about things like this, but to whom? And
Yeah.
does it reach the ears of those who it should get to?
And Joanne, thank you for your point. As parents, you're unsure if you make a fuss and you bring this up, will this actually make it worse for the student? Speaking of power, right? Are you, because you're not there every day, will this actually be worse for your child if you bring something up? You meant about even parent groups. Thank you. Thank you.
And we will
Thank you
address that
so
as we go
much.
further into this presentation too.
Absolutely. Exactly, Leonie. There's a huge assumption there. Not all Black male students like ball or sports. Have a conversation and take the time to know the person. Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And finally, our fourth one I've just brought in, just being conscious of time as well, so that we get through some of all of the content in our hour together. The last one is about the school's community partnerships. They only include, in this situation, the police, firefighters, and similar services through the local community center.
Again, we're going to think about who has the power and intent versus impact.
Yeah.
Look at the agencies which are involved here.
Some don't feel safe with some of, yes, the groups.
Especially with what is happening in some marginalized communities, having the police around is not always something positive to look forward to.
Maintaining the status quo. Yes, makes me feel unsafe with the current level of police violence against us. Thank you. Interactions with police in Black communities. Samani, thank you for taking us back to the book is only bad if the beginning of this, if that is the beginning of the statement, if there was inquiry before, absolutely. And I think in that statement, what you're saying there is if the student, wants to read this, but the student is told, right, in that state is told to read, so there, that's absolute. Thank you, Zamani, for bringing it, because if that's an interest, absolutely. And I want to go back to a comment, Anita, that you made just a few minutes earlier around, it's tough to know about the inequities, right? Because parent councils might struggle to draw interest. And so this is a huge piece, is how do we have to make choices. We have to, things like curriculum night happen, family literacy nights, community representation, like bringing partnerships from the community. And then even resources that we offer our students. Right? Absolutely, the book choice is guided by the student for sure, right? And Heather even asking, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of these community groups too, right? And so that's a big piece. We have these choices that we make. What are the subtle innuendos, if you will, the subtleties of where power choices are made through dominant narratives, dominant culture within society, which we know is steeped in white supremacy as well. So we're going to continue looking at that. So because all of these examples reflect a system where power is centered in the dominant narrative, as I just said. So we're going to delve deeper, and we're going to invite you to think about these moments again later. We're going to bring them back just to recenter them in a different way. But we want to invite you, as we continue, think about any moments that you've encountered where certain voices and perspectives have been excluded, ignored, or forgotten. White voices and perspectives are never excluded, ignored, or forgotten. They have become the norm and are just the way things are. And we want to position that they don't have to be just the way things are. So we're actually going to go, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts here as well about people in authority, absolutely, enforcement via violence, and that connection even to racialized bodies. Thank you, Zamani, as you've said, right? And so we are actually going to go into breakout rooms for the next about 7 minutes. And what we're going to do is in your breakout room, so whatever group you have, whatever group that you have on when we put you into breakout rooms, we ask, please, that you go to that slide that number slide, and you can, well, I'll show you how you can get there. Okay. And what we ask you to do is we're going to ask you to, with your group, organize. There are 9 sticky notes there, so you don't need access to type anything in. You're going to look at the 9 sticky notes as a group. Okay. And you're going to put the examples, you're going to put the 9 into 3 groups of 3 based on connections you see between them. All right. Please do not overthink it. Find the connections to bring the examples together. So I'm going to show you an example. This is, for example, is, excuse me, you know, putting them into 3 rows of 3, for example, or the 3 columns. All right. So you're going to read them together with your group and then organize them as you see, as you make the connections together. All right. And we will come in and out of
I
breakout.
think we have to do 5 minutes just to be conscious of the time, Lenny.
Sure.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So here we go. All right. So we will have 5 groups. We're going to open up the rooms. We're going to have 5 minutes, read over the stickies, think about, and you can actually grab the sticky notes just with your cursor if you grab, and they just move. All right. And we will travel in and out to help you as needed. Are there any questions before we open up all the rooms? Okay, thank you so much. So here we go.
Lenny, could you please resend that to broadcast it in the room? Because some people are not able to see it.
Absolutely.
Mhm. And then we'll just come
I'll
back
go to
quickly.
room. Yeah, I'll go. And I wonder if I put it here in the.
So just broadcast it in all the rooms.
Yes, I'll do it again. And I'm going to go to room 4. They've asked for help. So
we have to go quickly because we're now at 1:44. So I'm going to go to another room as well.
I'll go to 4.
Okay, I'll go to 1. And if you're here and not in a group, you can just look at what is presented on the screen and think about where you'd put them, what group you'd put them in.
Does that help everyone in room 4?
Lenny, you're still on the main page.
There you go, group 5.
Lenny? Helene?
Yeah, I was just in I was in the rooms giving them the,
I think we should end the breakout room because other rooms are having an issue and we just go verbally with it as
okay,
we're conscious of the time, because I was in group 1 and they didn't know where to access it as well as group 2. So I told them that we're going to end it. And when they
okay,
come back, we can just explain to them.
okay.
Mhm. And then we can share what we had as an example. I hope we didn't lose anyone.
No, it gives them 60 seconds to come back.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back. Are we supposed to be back right now?
So what is happening? I noticed that there are a few groups who are having issues
Yeah.
with, there were a few groups who were having issues with accessing the Jamboard. And because we're conscious of time, we're just going to take you back here because we have to be flexible, right? And if you're
Okay.
comfortable, just unmute and state where you see each of these fall in as it relates to what is seen on the Jamboard. So we'll take it up in a different way.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you for your flexibility, everyone. I'm sorry. I feel like I put it in the chat 6 times and it didn't come. I was trying to get into the rooms, but we want to honor time, and Tevanil is so right. Because we know you have other sessions this afternoon too. So any thoughts about these? Do you see a connection between any of them?
Just reading.
Absolutely.
I felt a connection between these kids from blank community with newcomers can barely speak English, let alone do well in university. And immigrants should take on an English name rather than keeping their name when coming to Canada. A language connection, obviously.
Okay, so you're saying these two here. So I've just put them together so you can see them. Thank you, Joanne. Any other thoughts?
There's definitely a colonial connection between the residential schools one and the Voting Act one.
So I'm just going to move this up for a second. Excuse my movement. So the voting here and the residential schools, colonial. Thank you so much, Valerie. Any other thoughts?
More of a bullying connection than thematic, but the student who's commented that she must be poor because she's wearing the same sweater, and the friend who's being called out as being gay because he's too shy to ask someone out.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joanne.
The one
Well,
about gay,
yes.
connected to the women's rights or the women in the home thing, because they're both non-inclusive.
So we even have the women should be raising children in the home, and then even moving, perhaps that one might be connected, right?
Yeah, that too. But what I was referring to is calling someone gay as if that was an insult, when it's really
Okay.
not.
When it's-
So it's non-inclusive.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Anita. I'm going to take us back. So we want to position these 9 examples, and I'm going to put it just so you have it as well. These are 9, they're not, again, exhaustive, but they're 9 examples. So there's a Jamboard so you could have the different ones. But we want to position it in terms of looking at the power triangle and looking at these 3 ways to organize around individual actions, institutions, or ways of thinking or ideology. So when we look at the three sticky notes, ways of thinking, so these are thoughts, we've grouped them as such. These kids from the blank community with many newcomers can barely speak English, let alone do well in university. Immigrants should take on an English name rather than keeping their name when coming to Canada. And women should be in the home raising children. Those are ways of thinking, okay, about power. When we look at individual, there we go, individual actions, we're looking at the ones where when she noticed the student in her class, yelling out, what are you, poor, for example, those are actions being taken when one of his friends, so this is the young man that's being called gay, right? Because he can't ask. So that act of doing that and seeing it, as Anita said, even as a put down, positioning it as such. And also after driving around the parking lot, so there was that sticky note about, I'm only going to be 15 minutes, so I'm going to park in the disabled parking spot, for example. Okay, and so those are actions being taken. Finally, the institution piece is where we see systemically, if you will, women being prevented from voting, Indigenous people even later being, prevented from voting, the police disproportionately stopping Black young men compared to other groups, and then the federal government and what happened with their role with residential schools. We see that institutional piece, right? Because frequently, what happens is we think of individual acts of oppression, such as name calling and excluding. And we often talk about them as individual acts, but we must understand that they are connected to institutions, such as school, and to ways of thinking. So when understanding oppression, if we look at this sort of like an iceberg, the tip there above the water, we see those individual actions often, okay? And for example, when we think about one police officer stopping Black young men, we have to think about what supports the idea that this action is acceptable. It's very much about seeing Black men as violent and dangerous, and this way of thinking is seen in our institutions, such as school, where Black boys and even Indigenous students are disproportionately suspended compared to other groups, for their behavior is seen as unsafe. And so for this reason, it is so important to understand individual actions as connected to institutions and ways of thinking that support it, and why we must disrupt these individual actions, institutions, and ways of thinking. So when disrupting oppression in schools, think about how you can make that connection in the conversations you have with other school community members. When you see individual actions of racism that go unchallenged, we need to talk about the ways of thinking that make others think it's okay. We need to think about what the school climate is, even in the passive ways, accept racism and make it acceptable in spaces. Okay.
So white supremacy, which many of us may think of as being the organized white supremacist group marching, but really it is the all-encompassing idea of white privilege, dominance, and assumed superiority of mainstream society where white identities, experiences, and lives are superior to that of others. What that means in our daily lives is that white experiences and identities come first, and it is normalized to the harm of all others. Think about bandages or crayons and what is considered to be skin color. Think about the books which are considered most read in school and those ones that are optional. Our political leaders are predominantly white, and when they're not, oftentimes, if they're not white, the conversation remains a topic. Important to white supremacy is that when these practices are questioned, those who are questioning the practices are seen as causing trouble, being biased, or just having an agenda. When we reflect on the title of this session and addressing the fog, as Dr. Daniel Beverly Tatum shared, please think about the above examples and how whiteness is centered in the choices made. If we do not stop to consider and think about these choices, we take them for granted and assume this is the way things are. They become as norm as the air we breathe. However, reflecting on this is like getting out of the fog. It allows us to think about who is missing from the conversation and decisions to work to include all voices and identities. In doing so, the fog begins to clear. If we intend to identify, challenge, and change the inequities of white supremacy, consider how we can build a better understanding of how white supremacy is embedded in all dimensions of society. What if we think about how we can begin to form allies to effectively use our existing knowledge and skills to disrupt the oppressive practices within our system? At this time, I'm going to ask Eleni to share a short video with you, but as you watch it, just please reflect on your immediate action and how you would respond. Now, as you reflect on the definition of white supremacy, think about how you see the manifestation of these dimensions in mainstream society, your community, or even your children's education. Reflecting on your own history and or lived experiences, think about instances where white supremacy may have an impact on any of the aforementioned dimension. That is the ideological or way of thinking, the institutional, the social, cultural, historical, political, and interpersonal aspects of our lives. The video from the Ontario Black History Society entitled Blocked Out History highlights the limited information which is shared in a Canadian history book about the contribution of Black people in Canada's history. Think about your immediate response to this video. Consider the effect texts such as this one may have on your child's or children's learning experience and education. In order to disrupt and dismantle white supremacy, we must first understand how it is presented as a norm in our institutions and by extension society. Think about other racial groups and how your story and or their stories are presented. Using the chat or just opening your mic, please share how you would begin to address this.
This may be bad, but I'm going to say it anyway because we're going to be uncomfortable. What I want to see from that textbook is how much of that textbook also talks about Indigenous history, Asian history, like not only not Black history, but also everyone else, all of the other cultures who have contributed to the creation of Canada. Like I understand the focus of, Black history here, but there are so many cultures that have created Canada to be what it is, especially the Indigenous nations here. Like I would like to know what that textbook includes about everyone.
And thank you, Valerie. That is why, I started by stating, think about your history or your story, this story and that of others, how it is presented. Because at this point, this is the focus, but how would you address it? Because there are other stories as well. And even in this story, we didn't even stop to think who is saying it and what is being stated, even though we see Black mentioned, but what is stated about Black? Hence I ask, and don't be afraid to say we're in a brave space. And this is a conversation that we're seeking to have today. Thank you, Valerie. But how would we begin to address this?
And Omar, you've said it here, the calling out of white supremacy. It's exactly that. How many pages, what is encompassing? And Valerie, your point is really, valid, because it's who is being positioned in these textbooks. This was a textbook, and I just put in the chat when Zamani said how powerful it was. Like, this is a maybe 5-year-old textbook. This is not, when I was younger in 1980, a textbook. We didn't reflect for a second. If you grew up here in Ontario and Canada, did you ever learn about residential schools, for example? I only did as a teacher.
Yes, Dee, who is telling the story?
Exactly.
And it is important for us to know too that our history, if it's Black history, doesn't begin at slavery. Someone else's history doesn't begin at the Pacific Railway. There are excellence in our history. So don't start with a negative. So my other question would be, think about what it looks like when your child sees themselves represented positively in a text and by extension within the education system. What does that look like when your children or grandchildren sees themselves and see a Black lawyer, see themselves working at NASA and knowing that people from their culture, their race were the first to create something? What does that look like? What does it make your children feel like? And how do you feel as a parent or guardian to see that within the education system? What does it do for those children?
Can I say, I'd like to say something in terms of answering that question. What does it do for them? Actually, when I just saw this, and then when Helen puts that this is like for 5-year-olds, that immediately brought me back to when I was reading when I first came here, the books were, you know, Dick and Jane, and
Yes.
all the things that we're seeing Dick and Jane do. And I just, so to answer your question, Tivonia, I would say that it's the conditioning of whiteness and centering whiteness begins way before anybody has an idea that it's happening, especially in a child's mind. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
And
crazy.
this has become the norm. Hence, we don't even see it as white supremacy anymore because it has so become the norm.
Yeah.
Thank you. But, you know, in order to challenge white supremacy, oh, is there anything else in the chat that I'm missing?
I'm just, thank you, Marcia and Omar. Yeah, just around Marcia sharing around, unfortunately, Black people are often left behind, while there are other groups too that are excluded when we look at how things are watered down. Oftentimes, unfortunately, Black history perspective is watered down. Thank you, Marcia and Omar. Even a school system built around whiteness, absolutely. And Zamani, thank you. That's exactly what you reflected there. Who was in those books and what perspective? And we need to think about all of the myriad of identities that, because our children hold the intersectionalities, their intersectionalities are diverse, and we need to make sure that they are reflected.
And even if it's for white students, they need to understand the intersectionalities of the world too, to have that experience. So it is not to the disadvantage of any group that we're presenting here today. And, you know, in order to challenge white supremacy, we need to disrupt through anti-racism. And anti-racism is the practice of identifying, challenging, and changing value structures and beliefs that are reinforced in systemic racism. Systemic racism is when our public institutions support racism. Take, for example, and please listen carefully. The Toronto District School Board data demonstrates that there are fewer racialized students in gifted programs than are reflected in the overall TDSB demographics. However, if you want to see where the racialized students are at the top of the podium, go look at the suspension and expulsion rates. They're highly represented, or overrepresented, I should say. Would like to come back to the 4 scenarios where we reflected on earlier in the session to spend some time to discuss how we can take into action to change white supremacy. Using the definition we just looked at about anti-oppression, our focus will look at identifying, challenging, and changing the values, structures, and behavior that perpetuate systemic oppression to disrupt the white supremacy inherent in each example. The equity policy 37 provides an outline of how schools should be operating, including direction to curriculum, school climate, expectations of staff, inclusive practices, and policy. The policy requires schools and school communities to be inclusive of all, respecting who we all are and honoring our lived experiences. This is what supports parents, caregivers, and guardians in challenging when something oppressive is happening in schools and demanding change. Another policy that may support you in this is the protecting and promoting of human rights and addressing discrimination and other inequities documents. This policy provides specific steps in addressing human rights incidents so that you are able to ask about incidents and how they were addressed and the next moves which should be taken. And as I'm really cognizant of the time here, you know, even if we should look back at the incidents where the letter was sent out to the parents, but it was written in a language that the parents do not understand. They want them to be a part of the group. However, the intent versus the impact, they were left out because the parents just do not speak English. Now, because we want to get to some other resources and some other steps that will help, I really want to share with you and to let you know that the TDSB is making some shift in, I want us to look at, okay, Lenny, would you like to look at the shifts that
Keep
are
going,
being
honey.
made?
No,
Okay, yeah.
that's okay.
So
Yes, love.
the TDSB is making moves to respond to white supremacy. However, we recognize that what comes out of policy looks totally different in schools and school communities. On the slide are several important changes of how the TDSB is currently centering equity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression to disrupt white supremacy. We want to highlight a few of them as place of support for students, parents, caregivers, and families. Each site, rooted in policies, provide information, but also context and language to use when disrupting white supremacy in schools. One of which is academic pathway. Academic pathways ensure nearly every TDSB high school student has choices and is met with high expectations for all pathways to apprenticeship, workplace, college, and university is one of the key changes the board is making. Additionally, through deep roots in and partnership with communities, the Urban Indigenous Education Center of Excellence continues to disrupt colonialism and white supremacy, supporting Indigenous students at the Wandering Spirit schools and throughout the TDSB. More recently, through creating the Center of Black Excellence for Black Students' Achievement through Center in Black Brilliance, the center provides support and learning opportunities for Black students throughout the TDSB and support for Black families as well as professional learning for TDSB staff to disrupt anti-Black racism. The TDSB has made bold commitment to equity, human rights, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. Each and every student is capable of success. The focus of equity, and the focus of this group, the Equity, Anti-Racism, Anti-Oppression team, is ensuring that all students can succeed by having equitable access to opportunities, learning resources, and tools, with the goal of improving the outcome of the most marginalized students. And finally, the Human Rights Office is here to enable support and inspire the creation and preservation of the proactive, inclusive, and transformational culture of human rights at TDSB, in which all members of the Toronto District School Board community can equitably flourish with respect and achieve equitable outcome in the Toronto District School Board learning and working environment, which is free from discrimination and harassment. They aim to do this through transformation, collaboration, fairness, and support, and is supported by guiding and by the guide of the Ontario Human Rights Code. And we will share this. We're happy to share some of these resources with you and the slides because we have come to the end. Lenny?
So there are some questions.
Could you share this?
Before we go, there are some great comments in the chat. So if you give us just a quick minute, this is definitely, we need to look at how how all of even these departments manifest, excuse me, and uphold white supremacy too, and how things are shifting. So when we look at these current shifts that Tavanil is talking about, it's really looking and working and creating policy and trying to, and it's not perfect. Shifts are being made, absolutely. But it is slow, and absolutely, I think Marcia, you wrote here around how people still continue to experience harassment and racism, absolutely. And then even Heather, your comment, why would we need a Black school at all if it was truly inclusive? And so I want to just take us as we end, and this is how we come together to, we have to think about even our unions and how they are positioned as well, and working with administrators, union leaders, looking at educators, everyone, parents, community, and let's not forget our students as well, because their voices are important. So we want to end here by allowing you to think and take this with you about how we share the brilliance of all of our children's identities in the learning environment and wider communities, and how we can ensure together in partnership that we can dismantle power, we can use power for good, we can think about our own positionality, think about how we include the voices within our communities, the perspectives, and work together, okay, to ensure that this happens. We do have, when you get this presentation, we've created a resource list of the different resources that we've shared today. So all of these are linked, and thank you, Anil. Yes, please get involved. And it doesn't have to be just through the school council. There are many, many ways to get involved. So please talk to the administrators of your school, the educators, each other as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. This video will be on the YouTube site. Thank you, Anil.
Yes, I'm sorry to unmute. It will be on the YouTube site. There's a spot where you sign into this entire workshop where it has the slides. Were you able to see that, Zamani? I'm wondering if I can share the link. Let me see if I can find it.
No problem.
And as he's looking for the link, we'd just like to remind you that as it relates to anti-racism, anti-oppression, white supremacy, the conversation never ends. And an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours wouldn't have been enough to go into these courageous conversations here today. So thank you for participating. And as we begin to warm up, then we have come to an end.
Thank you so much. We do. We need to make space for these conversations. All of us, all of our children need to learn about who they are and also about the world around them as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful that you were with us. Thank you so much.
And please continue to enjoy what's left of your weekend.
Yeah.
Happy Sunday. We appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today.
Yes. Absolutely.
I have found it. I'm going to post it in the chat. And I'm just going to quickly let you know that when you click on it, on the right-hand side, when you scroll a little bit down, there's like two sort of yellowy orange on my screen with the dates, and it says meet our speakers and it says slides. So when you click on slides, you can find this workshop as well as all of the other workshops that were a part of the Parents and Caregivers Parents and Caregivers Partners Conference. I hope that's helpful, okay? All right.
Thank you so much, Anil.
Oh, no worries. I'm a TDSB employee, so these are, I wanted to attend everything and I couldn't, so I had to pick and choose.
We
So
appreciate your help. Thank you.
yeah, and sometimes you need to go back and listen to things and, anyway, everybody have a wonderful rest of the Sunday, as was mentioned by the host, and please, please get involved and let your voices be heard. That is the only way we can affect a change. All right? Take care.
Thank you so much.
Hi everybody, thank you very much for your presentation today. Are the videos, so the like people talking, gonna be on the YouTube? Is that what that means as well? Okay, perfect.
I believe so. I believe because it's all recorded. So yes.
Okay, because yesterday I couldn't get on at all. So this is great.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay, bye for now.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you for
me,
coming.
just to let you know, not I think not at it won't be on right away because there's some editing that needs to be done.
Okay.
But otherwise, yes, everything will be on. My understanding is though the keynote speakers though, I think that because of contractual obligations with the keynote
Okay.
speakers, it'll be only like it'll only be offered for like a certain amount of time. Like it won't be on the YouTube channel forever kind of thing.
Okay.
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 Thank you, Felicia. Thank you.
It was great meeting you. Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much
Pleasure
for
is
being
ours
here.
as well. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. And I'm aware that some of you have other conferences, sessions to attend to today. So thank you. I know we've taken up a few more minutes than expected, but thank you for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I have one more question, just quickly. Does this happen with, do you all teach, like the work that you're doing, does it happen with school councils as well? Because like, I mean, some parents, anyway, to make a long story short, has an interaction with my son and a parent, like another parent actually came after my son. So I'm trying to figure out, there are some parents who need to look at white supremacy and how that feeds and all that kind of stuff as well. So are there ways to engage other parents about anti-oppressive behavior? And do we do that through the school council? Like, you know?
So Tevin Neal and I, along with our team, have been meeting with schools the last few weeks around their equity goals.
Okay.
And at a few that I've been at, and Tev's, I don't know if maybe you've heard this and seen this as well. Some of the schools, at a couple, they've talked about engaging with parent council to do some learning. And so that's part of a school plan. So it would merit a conversation with administrators, even to say that you attended this, and just to talk about how to embed. So at one school, and specifically that last week that I met with, they talked about even having sessions around anti-racism, anti-Black racism, anti-oppression for parents, like having speakers come in the evenings or at different times. So it is being taken up, not in as many spaces as it should, AKA all, but that is something that's being done. And so it isn't a
addition to that,
conversation.
Lenny, she could reach out to the Center for Excellence, for the Center for Excellence for Black Students Achievement, because we're all under one umbrella, even though we're equity, anti-oppression, and racism, and they'll help because we don't go out to the communities. It's the schools that would set up a referral for us to come in and speak to the staff and the school councils themselves. But if you reach out, then as a community, the Center of Excellence for Black Students Achievement may be able to set up something where we can come in to have this conversation, because we see where it's necessary within the education system.
So
yeah, our work really, sorry, Zamani.
No, sorry, Hans. So the onus is really on the school community party to reach out to. Wow.
But you see, the TDSB is making a move, hence they've created this center, and then there are 4 of us, and we are here to support all 560 schools. So we're stretched thin as well.
Yeah.
And but if you should reach out to any of these agencies, even there might be a human rights piece there. If you're able to reach out to the Human Rights Office, they might be able to give you the right direction to which you may go. Because we don't want to tell you that you should go to this specific place and then that's not where, but for sure, the Human Rights Department, maybe the center, which is within the TDSB as well, may be able to help.
I mean, go ahead, Helen.
Go ahead, love.
Well, I was more speaking to the fact that this is the reason why we need those centers for Black students or Indigenous students or what have you, because I think it might be even more beneficial once, I mean, the fact that the four of you are here is progress, and I'll support progress every day. It's still, the onus is on the school to reach out to, as opposed to, you need to, this is part of in order to change the schooling system, we're in transition right now. So as a part of the change, it is heavily, or highly recommended that you attend this session to help understand how learning these things can help you and your children be contributors to the school that your children go to. It's a very different mindset from me coming to my school counselor to say, can we do this? And can we find the supports to make it happen? Versus this TDSB saying, because we have a highly racialized population, or not, in this, but in my case, we have a highly racialized population of students. So each parent needs to go through this because their children come here and it's going to inform how they grow here. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I just find that interesting.
And Samani,
I appreciate it.
that this is being held with the parents as partners.
Yes.
So even though you might see yourself as one parent, at least you have a start to navigating the system and know where to go. Other parents might not even know the first steps. At least you know the first step to take back to your school community and your parenting community, and you know that there are these resources out here for you.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point, Zamani, because it's so true how, why is it this, I hear what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong too, around why isn't this just a norm, like a given that we just do it at every community, and it's not about administration, for example, having to access or parents having to ask, that it's just done. And that's right. And I hear what you're saying. And our work is, right, our work is really as even the center, to be honest, like a lot of our work is with educators. And so we try to, but really it sits more so with working with school teams. And then we try as best as we can to sort of stretch into community, but we build capacity for the schools to be doing that because there's so few of us. So that's the other piece around even the teams from even the Urban Indigenous Education Center has a team, the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement, and then our equity team. More so there, it's done in community for sure. But the hope is that communities, especially school teams, are going and doing this as well automatically, and it's not, and we know that, to be honest and transparent with you.
Because if you're an equity seeking group, the LGBTQ community, the Indigenous community, what have you, all of our children participate in this particular school system, which that by that alone means that we need to be aware of the contributions made by those equity seeking groups. Absolutely. But I think, you just give me I guess that's where the vision is at, because the fact that the four of you are here, I've been part of my school's, my son's parent council since he was in grade 1. So, and he's in grade 7 now. And you all weren't here earlier. So it's nice to see that you're here now, which is good.
Like
I said, I'll support the progress, but I just find it mind-boggling that in this period of great transition, because I think really that's what's happening with the TDSB. I just think it's interesting that we're not saying are you a member of a racialized or an equity seeking group? Yes. Then as a result of that, even if you're not, but just making it required, I wouldn't want to say mandatory, but making it required for parents to come and get this training so you can understand what's happening to you or happening to your child. So then you would know that, hold on, my child experienced this and it's a problem we need to address. Because I think for me, that's actually where parents are at. I didn't even know it was a problem. Most parents didn't even know that it was a problem before, whatever happened to them. Some parents don't even see it because they don't have time to see it, or they don't know how to recognize whatever's happening.
Not that they don't have time to see it or not recognizing it, but parents do trust the system. And especially as immigrants, parents coming in, we trust the education system because that's what we grew up knowing. Knowing, sorry.
Exactly, it's true.
It's true.
I'm one of those
knowing and learning to trust the education system, and with that, we expect that wherever we go, and we just leave
They'll
our
be taken
children
care of.
within the system, and
Yeah, and that's not the case.
sometimes, not
that's why I
always,
find
it's to their disadvantage.
Exactly. It's crazy, but I appreciate seeing you. Thank you very much. I look forward to
Thank you,
somehow
and
seeing
thank
you
you
all in
for
the
joining
future.
us in the conversation, for sure.
All
Yes.
right.
Thank
Take
you,
care now.
Zaman. Take
You're
care.
welcome.